Hello and welcome to another video. This one is going to be beginner tips on Blender. I'm using 3.4 and last year I really got into Blender to do a lot of CAD visualization, and I'm kind of going through the things that I like sort of teach people in the beginning just to sort of help them, get used to the program and, save them a lot of time, because there's a lot of things that maybe, people you don't know about, and it's really helpful in the long run. So I just started a brand new 3.4, and the first thing I do is I go here and we go to preferences, edit preferences. First thing I want to do on interface is I want to take out the splash screen because I don't need to see it every time we open up the file. And then here in themes, this is where you can kind of like change the colors to whatever you like. And the only things I really like to do is I like to change the X and Y grid into I like to change the color a little bit. It's just my own like personal preference. So here under axis and gizmos, I'll make the Y just a little more bluish, like more aqua. And then I'll make the X just a little more purple. And I also, when you select something, you see this like sort of like orange. I kind of like to change that too. And then that would be under 3D viewport. So whenever you're changing a color and you're not sure exactly where to find it, if you see up here, it has like the sort of icon that tells you where what this window is. And so here we know that it's a 3D viewport, right? So here in 3D viewport, I see it, and then here there's active object. And then I'm just going to change the hue to something, I like it more like a baby blue. There's a couple other things that I want to do with this. I want to make it so that when we're orbiting around the scene, like zooming in and out, I don't want to, if you have multiple objects and stuff, right? Like if I want to go to that object, it's every time you use your middle mouse wheel to zoom in or out, it's always focused on, the previous thing is sort of like focused to, right? So like in a traditional sense, you would like click this, then you press period, and then the period like basically, it looks at the thing that you selected. And that also works in if you press period here and there's like a big list, it'll basically like zoom into whatever you're selected. And to me, I find it's a lot easier if I press zoom to mouse position, because that way, if I could just zoom out and then I go here and I could zoom in, I could zoom out and I could zoom in. Another thing I like to change is here under key map is if anytime you're pressing tab, it'll go from edit mode to object mode. But a lot of times, if you're gonna be using different sort of settings, you want to change it to different things, right? So here under key map, go tab for pie menu, right? And so now every time you press pie, you'll see this like menu, right? So like if you're going into sculpting mode, you're going to sculpting mode, and or back to edit mode, and so it's a lot easier to kind of go into these different settings and change them on the fly. The only thing about that is that you have to press it and then click. So if you go pie menu drag, you could just press it, hold it, and then you could just drag, and wherever you're dragging, you could just kind of do that. So once you actually kind of get it in your memory where they're at, it could be a really quick way, to change that up, right? And then another thing too, like just to kind of know like some shortcuts, is if you press Z, it changes into the different and you hold it, it changes into the different shading settings, right? So if you want to see like the rendering or the wireframe or whatever, right? And then if you go here, extra shading pie menu items, it's and when you press Z again, see you get a nice little an extra layer of like tools and stuff, so you could like quickly toggle the overlays and stuff like that. So this really helps out too. So now that we got the preferences out of the way, we can focus on basically this like sort of user interface of Blender, because I know it could be a little overwhelming, but just remember that all of these can be whichever like window you want, right? So you could, when you click here, you can move them to however you want, and then if you see this upper corner, you could change them to whichever each other is, right? So this is like if I want to make this a 3D viewport, or get it back into the outliner, like it's really easy. And then to sort of like control how to join them, it's really once you really practice it gets really intuitive. So the main thing to remember is when you go into any of these corners, you see how it turns into a little cross. And then so basically when it's a cross and you click and drag, if you go in, it's gonna divide whatever place you're at. And if you go drag it out, it's gonna merge it, right? So for example, if I click here and I go like that, see it's dividing it because I'm going in, right? I'm here inside this little window and I'm going in, right? And then so if I want to actually merge them, I'm gonna go like that and then outside, right? In to the out. And the same thing in the bottom, right? If I want to merge this down, in, down, right? You could also make it so that you just kind of like cut them, not join them, right? So if I go like that, see, it's gonna cut all of these like that, so that you know I'm not losing that window. Or if I want to go here and go like that, see, it cuts it. Another thing too is if you want to like switch them, if you press Control, it'll like switch them, right? And here's a really good one. If you hit down Shift and up, see now it's its own window. So this is great for like you know, you could change it here to a 3D viewport. So if you have multiple monitors, you know, that are kind of like all over the place, if you know, if you need more windows, just remember to hit down Shift, and then that becomes its own window. And then you know, you could put, if you want to put your outliner somewhere, like you know, in some random screen and whatever, it's make it so its own window. That I wish I would have learned that easier, because I was always sort of stuck in this sort of, you know, square. So remember, like, go to the corner and then up, and then you know, you could do whatever you want with it. So some other tips and tricks on the 3D viewport is that if you press 0, right, you go to the camera, right, and then if you press the middle mouse button, it'll, you know, it'll sort of make sure that the border is like that. But every time you like hold it and press it down, you get out of that, right? So to sort of stop that from happening, you press N to get these menus from the corner of the window, and then you go View, and then you go Lock Camera to Viewport. And so that way, when whenever you're actually rotating it, the camera, when you're in camera mode, you know, that you press 0, you you know, it's always following your view. You know, that's a lot more intuitive than trying to sort of like move the camera around. You know, and if for some reason you need to like zoom in and out of this, you just go like that. You know, you change it and then you go back, right? So remember, that's N. So if you notice when I press 0, right, it goes in and out of the camera view. So the other ones are 2. If you press like 1, you know, it goes into I think this is the front, and then 3 is the side. But if you press Control 3, it goes onto the other side, right? So if you're looking at the front and then you press Control front, it'll go into the other side, right? So that way it's a lot easier to you know, move stuff around. And then also if you press 5, it goes into perspective mode, right? So or like orthographic mode, depending on where you're at, right? So if you ever want to see something orthographic or not, you press 5 and it goes out of the way. Another thing I like to change when I'm in this mode is I go here into the solid shading mode. I like to go into here and add cavities. That way it's a little easier to kind of see what's going on, you know. And then remember that if you want to like sort of not see the grid or anything like that, you just have to go into here. And then here you could kind of like, if there's something that you don't want to see, you know, you can kind of take it out here, or like, you know, you want to see these axes, everything's here. So remember that once you're done changing the settings on how you want them, you select, me personally, I don't even want to start with a cube. All I really want is a camera. I don't even want a light either. So once you have the file sort of how you want it, you go to File, and then Defaults, you go Save, File, Defaults, Save Startup File. And then that way, every time you turn on your Blender, you'll have all of your preferences saved, and everything will be good. So one of the important things to sort of get good at is how to actually place things in your scene, right? Because if we press Shift A and then, you know, we press a plane or whatever, it's always going to end up getting created in the 3D cursor, right? The 3D cursor is right here. It's this little cursor that you see. So you press Shift and right click, it will get placed in whatever like 3D geometry you find, right? So like let's say I'm gonna do a cube, right? And then I'll put the cube over here. If I kind of like go Shift A like that, and then I add a you know, a little UV sphere, you see, it's gonna end up right there, right? And then if you press Shift S, like let's say I wanted it in this like corner, I'm gonna hit Tab, select that, and then if you press Shift S, you could do cursor to selected, right? And then now if I go Shift A and start a UV sphere, see now it's exactly right there, right? And then this is also very important, like if you're in my, because I do a lot of like automotive stuff, like a lot of times you'll have different you know, like let's say you'll have a tire, right? So just to kind of like represent a tire, I'll do a little cylinder, right? And then let's pretend that it came in a giant like you know, a file where the pivot point wasn't exactly, if I rotate it, you know, it wasn't based off where this tire is, right? Let me make it a little more I'm gonna scale it and then Z to make it look a little more like a tire. And then I'll rotate it. So rotate it along the x-axis, and then I'll press 90. There you go. So like let's say I have this like wheel, right, and I want to center it. A way to do that is I could press Shift, and then I'm gonna select all of them, and then I'm gonna press Shift S, cursor to selected, and you see now the cursor is in the center of all those, right? So I'm gonna tab to get out of object mode, and then here I'm gonna change the origin, which is like the center of it, into origin to 3D cursor, right? So now now I kind of like fixed that, even though the pivot point was like somewhere random in space, right? And that's because of my Shift S. That's also good, like if I wanted to add a circle, you know, or like, you know, I was building another you know, object that's centered in the wheel. I could always do that, right? Or like let's say I have like a brake or something that I need to place to that wheel. I could always go here and then press Shift S and then selection to cursor. See, so now it's going to be exactly in the middle of that. So this is a very powerful way to sort of do that. And since I do that all the time, I'm moving the pivot point a lot. I don't wanna go all the way up here and then set origin and all that. So what I want to do is put it in my favorites. So the favorite is you press Q, and then I have already here, but basically go to objects and whatever you want. Well, it could be anything, but you go and then you right click, and then here here says remove, but yours will say add to quick favorites. And so let's say I have like a sort of like a little building, right? Like, or something like this, right? Um, and I want to like snap it into a planet or anything like that, but I also want it oriented the right way. We could go into snap here, and then we could go face project, center. That means it's gonna be the origin. Align rotation to target. And so once you do that, remember if for snap, you know, it doesn't have to be like activated. You just press Alt, right? So like if I do that, right, and I press Alt to activate it, see, it snaps to whatever is the underlying geometry. This is kind of the same method that the asset browser uses to kind of like, you know, when you drag something in, and it's a very quick way to like, you know, set things up and place things, right? So like let's say let's say I wanted to set this like wheel over here, right? I could actually do like a quick, like we'll go here, cursor to selected, right? And then Q, origin to 3D cursor. And then so now I could go like that, right? And put this like wheel wherever I want, right? So learning to use the 3D cursor and placing it, and also, you know, and then being able to put the origin very quickly, it definitely helps. You know, because a lot of my workflow is very like grabbing wheels, adding, you know, getting CAD data, finding the center and stuff like that, right? So Shift S, And so all of this is it's a very good way to, you know, to dominate. Once you really start learning that, it makes it a lot easier to move, you know, your assets around and build your scenes and all that. Another important thing is what happens when when you have multiple objects, right? In your multiple meshes in the same object, right? A lot of times you don't want that to happen, right? You might want to be rotating one thing without the other. So the quick way to do that is, you know, you can select all, like whatever you want, and then you press L. So it'll select like all of it, right? And then you press P, and then that separates it by selection, right? That way it's a lot, with this it's a lot easier to, you know, separate all your scene. And also if you didn't want to separate it and go back, you just press Control J, and now they're back into you know, the same, you know, object. And then a lot of times you might get a file that has different materials, right? So like let's say that all these three are a certain material, right? All right, I'm gonna do a new material, and then that one we'll call like rubber real quick, right? And then like let's say that there's also another like rim, right? Uh, whenever you're in with the materials, right? All you gotta do is you add another one, you click here, and then you press assign, right? That's in the material properties, you know, here in the properties panel. A good way to remember that is that if you're ever like changing a certain property of like anything you want, it's probably gonna be here in the property menu, right? So here I'm gonna assign that, and then go new, and then like let's make it like black or whatever, right? I'm gonna assign this one with that same black material. So let's say we have this. Let me change it so it's a little more, so we could kind of like see the difference a little more, right? So like let's say we have an object with all these, right? So instead of like, especially when we're talking about big objects with a bunch of different, you know, materials, instead of, you know, trying to find all of them individually, which obviously here it's really easy because it's, you know, there's only three, but you could always, you know, without selecting anything, press P, and then you can go by materials, right? And then remember, you can also go by loose parts. So if you have a lot of different components that are like nicely organized, that's another way of sort of separating it, just in case everything came in as just one single object. So if I hit material, so now all these have, you know, changed into their own material, you know. And then another thing that will save you time in terms of like these like you know, changing materials like this is like, let's say that you have a bunch of different objects and they all have one material, and you want to change that material for like another material, right? So like let's say all of these, you know, all of these pinks, and this one I want to change it to like, let's say this, which is like, we'll call it, you know, like little yellow one, right? Because I see a lot of times it's, you know, people are gonna go like one by one and all that. You know, you kind of want a little bit of you know, like global reassignment, right? So how do you do that? You go up here into here, which is into the outliner, right? And then here you're gonna change it to Blender file, right? And then you're gonna see the materials here. And then so this is the this material, we'll call it pink, right? So if you see, here's the pink material, right? And all you have to do is you right click it, and then you press remap users like that. And then that's when you could choose, you know, what color you want them to all change to, and you press yellow and okay. This is one of those things that I see a lot of people just take a long time to sort of like individually find the different components and the colors. But if you like sort of understand this aspect of it, it makes it a lot easier to, like, you know, if you're working on a car interior and there's like, you know, millions of objects and you want to change all the metallic chrome into something else, you know, going here is your best bet to basically, you know, change them all in one go. So one of the most valuable tools that are inside of Blender is the asset browser. So I'm gonna go here and I'm gonna change it to the asset browser, and then I'm gonna go user library, and then see, if you see here, it says that there's nothing there, right? So to set it up, you click on Open Preferences, right? And then here in library, you press Open, and then you go into wherever you're storing your asset library. And this is a very important aspect of it, and it's its own little lesson. So I have all my assets here in my asset library folder, and I press accept. And then so now it's loading up all of my different assets, right? So assets are a great tool that you've never heard of them before, and it really speeds up your whole creative process. And I'll show you guys in a second how that works. So the asset library is an incredible, powerful tool set that lets you basically, categorize all of your like assets, and then it makes it very easy for you to access them, right? So I'm gonna like, let me show you a little bit of mine, right? So I have a bunch of like different car models. I even have the car models I've made, and then I also have different car models that I either got online or bought off packs, right? So and then another thing I have is my is a bunch of HDRIs that I have already. So basically once you actually have a nice sort of like collection of different assets, it really makes it life a lot easier. So like, for example, I'm gonna delete this, and then I'm gonna add a floor, right? And then if I go into like render mode, I'm gonna move this to the side, right? And then we're only lit up by this little light. I don't even want that light there, because I'm gonna go into my HDRIs, and then I'm just gonna see which ones I like more, right? Right now this is using the EV shader, and I think if I go into I think because I'm using my GPU to record, it might go into we're going to cycles. It might slow down my voice recording and also my screen, but we'll see. So see, now I have a floor, right? And I have an environment, and then like, let's add my little car model here, and I'll use this little like Porsche I found online. I think I've seen a bunch of YouTubers sort of like use this too, you know. But the good thing about all this is that I have all these little materials, right? If I want to change anything, it's extremely easy, you know, to to make changes. I even have cities. These are all like, a bunch of these were like I bought, I even have skyscrapers. I want to add a little skyscraper here. Not so little. Let me move it. Let's see, I'll move it that way. When you learn to use the asset browser very well, it really starts saving a lot of time in like setting up your scenes, and like, just building up these worlds once you start collecting a bunch of assets. So it's really important to sort of, look at some asset browsing videos, and then use it so that you don't have to start from scratch all the time. And so this kind of wraps up the video, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys, this is very much like, these are the problems, or like, the steps I see that a lot of people, makes it kind of frustrates them about Blender. But, once you eliminate these sorts of like, difficulties, it really makes Blender a very quick, very intuitive software to use. So I hope this video helped. And let me know what other subjects you want me to cover. I'm gonna try to make a lot more Blender oriented videos this year. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I hope you guys have a nice week. Bye.